Welcome to the Okie Woodsman channel. I think we can officially say that gasoline chainsaws are not dead. If you don't know about this, you might be living under a rock. Today, Husqvarna announced the 564 XP, which looks like a modified 562 with fuel injection. Oh my gosh, that's wild. That's absolutely wild. I never thought this would happen. We're gonna watch this. I'll pause, kind of interject a little bit, and then I have a conversation to have with you, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say in the comment section. I'm gonna share my opinion, share some of the desires I have for when this saw launches here in the United States, which I think is gonna be a while. So let's get started. 564 XP fuel injection. The first thing I want to mention is these guys over in Europe cut so much differently than we do in the States. And when I say we, I just mean everyone here in the United States. We have West Coast guys, East Coast guys. None of them cut quite like this. It mentions exceptional power. Right here on the screen, it talks about exceptional power and instant acceleration. Just listen to the throttle response on this saw. It talks about that they slimmed down the size. Are they talking about in comparison to the 562 XP? I would assume they're talking about the 562 Mark II. That's pretty incredible, but I already feel like my 562 Mark I is already pretty slim. So are we talking about a millimeter here? Are we talking about something substantial? They also mention 70cc power. We'll just have to see about that. The specs look impressive. I believe that superior cooling is also going to be an important factor as well. If this thing is turned up like it looks like it is, it's got to stay cool. And that muffler sounds like it's highly congested. What a beautiful saw. What a beautiful saw. The black accents look incredible, absolutely incredible. I can't help but wonder if this is the version that we'll actually see, because if you remember right, the 562 Mark II came out with orange top covers, kind of like what you'd see on like a 545 or a 555 type saw, and now they're coming back with the gray plastic insert. I really like that gray plastic insert on my first gen 562 XP. Great chain, C83 or C85, whatever. If you watch the channel, you know I love those Husky flip caps. Magnetic fuel filtration captures metal debris. I'm going to need your help. Is that something new? I feel like it might be something new. I think that they're probably trying to keep that injector clean, but I am not the mechanic. I'm not the most understanding about all these things. I know that Husky came out with a revision on the fuel filter. My understanding was it was just a finer stone. I think that they were blaming carburetor failures on too porous of a filter before. I want to know if that was from cold or what. Something that I'm curious about is, the 500i is a phenomenal starter. If that was a hot start and you have to press the bulb, that's going to be a bummer. But if that was a cold start, or if that's what you can expect out of a cold start, that's going to be fantastic. Talking about the mechanicals, the stroke and so forth, I'm not a porter, I'm not a mechanic. I feel like these saws rev so much already, like the 562s. Do we expect that the stroke might be getting even shorter? I mean, because they already have a short stroke, right? Air injection is fantastic. That's a different air cleaner. That's the first time I've noticed that. That's going to be controversial. A lot of people really dislike the outboard clutches. I don't really have a problem with them. I don't find that it's very difficult to put the chain on. I like that Husqvarna's historically have had that dimple that you can press grease into and grease the clutch bearing. I think that's pretty cool. I'd say my biggest negative to the outboard clutch is the inability to remove your power head from the bar if you get yourself pinched. I mean, I know you're not supposed to get yourself pinched, but when you do, it's nice to be able to do that. Husqvarna definitely has a market that they're going after. I really don't think that they view the whole world's needs, if you will. I think they really do develop their saws for the type of cutting that's over in Europe. I mean, it just seems like it. They're extremely nimble, extremely high strung. These guys are revving these things to the moon and back. Heated handles. Nice. I don't understand, there's more to this saw than this kind of stuff. They talk about the fuel tank sight. They talk about the molded felling marks. My boy's 440 Husky has the same thing. Now, they're not painted, if I recall correctly, but there's molded felling marks. They ought to have that. Husqvarna has my favorite feeling saws. Anti-vibe is just outstanding. A few of my friends have recently stepped into the Husqvarna realm of saws, and they said, I get what you mean. Dustin and Mike. We can talk about, I've noticed in the comment sections on the different Facebook groups and everything, immediately guys are talking about mounting long bars on them and everything. You can tell that these saws are really developed with that 20-inch bar in mind. I really like my 562 with a 20-inch bar. It's not because of power characteristics or anything. It's just that it just feels good, especially a 20-inch light bar. What an incredible, incredible announcement. Did you guys expect that? I have a lot to say, and we're going to transition into the next stage in this video here. One of the things I'm seeing here on their website is that they're showing it in 18 and 20-inch bars. I bet you by the time it comes to the US, I bet you'll see 18, 20, 24, and 28, more than likely. I think one of the biggest takeaways on this launch is the fact that gasoline or two-stroke chainsaws are not dead. There was a kind of a sentiment, I don't know if it was rumors or assumptions based on how things were going in the world. The idea that two-stroke chainsaws were going to be around much longer was really in question, especially with things like that have happened in California, with them banning, gasoline-powered equipment. And I can tell you this, when I was having trouble with my 562 XP, the first gen one with multiple revisions, it's like the last of that Mark 1 model. That's what I'm going to refer to it as Mark 1, even though it's not officially designated as that. My dealership, the mechanic was like, this stuff is going away. I think there's going to be a lot more battery stuff coming out. In fact, side by side, they did announce a battery powered saw at the same time simultaneously. I also want to go ahead and mention dates. This is tentatively scheduled for October, and that is in Europe. That is not in the United States. I really wish they would launch these things simultaneously in our market as well. There's a lot of excitement around this saw. So let's talk about what this means. Up until now, I think that the Steel 500i was the most significant chainsaw development in years. That saw is extremely popular. It's been around for a long time, and the overall sentiment is that people really like them. What I find really interesting is that Husky chose to enter the fuel injected market, not with a 70, not with a 90, but a 60cc saw. Very, very interesting. It's like they don't want to launch it and go up against a 500i directly. You know what I mean? I can tell you this right now. I have made a lot of content on chainsaws, mostly ones that I own. And I can tell you right now that through my affiliate links, I track the saws that sell. And the number one seller for me in Echo is a 60cc saw. And out of the Husqvarna saws that I can track back to me, it's a 562 XP Mark II. That is the most popular chainsaw that sells through my links. Now, that could be because those are the saws that I run primarily, but I think there's a few factors. And the reason for that is I believe that 60cc is that sweet spot for capability, size, and price. There's not much you can't accomplish with a 60cc saw. It's not a saw that I definitely want to be cutting 30-inch oak with in all the time. But if you've got a storm cleanup or you've got very few trees that size on your property or in your area, 60cc can do it, but again, you don't want to do it all the time. Most of the time on my property, that saw is all I need. It's the biggest I need. Anything above that is just to scratch an itch. It's because I like it. It's because it's fun. It's because I periodically get out and do cut on larger wood sometimes. Do I need a 395? The answer is probably no. A question I have is, will there be a fuel injected version of the 550 XP, the 572 XP, and the 592 XP? What do you guys think? Do you think that they need to do that? Do you think they should do that? Share your thoughts down below. And the reason why I asked that question is because Stihl has famously only introduced the 500i. People want to see a larger fuel injected saw, and I think that many would like probably an MS400 fuel injected saw as well, maybe even a 261. I think it's pretty interesting that Stihl launched that 500i a long time ago. They haven't expanded further into that realm of production. I can't help but wonder if it's just not as cost productive, or if maybe the pricing would be so high on those smaller saws, because Stihl's already really high. I just wonder if they know that it's probably not worth it on the smaller saws. And the elephant in the room is that Stihl is launching the 400.1, the MS 400.1, like right now. And that saw has created a ton of interest. I mean, I actually myself wanted to get my hands on one because it looked so good. I think that this 564 XP completely overshadows that saw at this point. And the reason why is it's a first for Husqvarna, and it's in that same class. I just think that, you know, if this saw is something special, this is what I would rather have over a 400.1. What about you guys? This might ruffle some feathers, but you have two different computer controlled saws besides the 500i, and that is the M-Tronic saws on the Stihl and the Auto Tune on the Husqvarna. It is my opinion, I've never owned one, but I have run them. It is my opinion that Stihl has done a better job on their Auto Tune or M-Tronic type saw. Let me explain. When I had trouble with my 562 XP, the Husqvarna dealer deemed that they needed to replace the carburetor out of recommendation from Husqvarna technical support. You see, on a Husqvarna Auto-Tune saw, the solenoid, what's in charge of making the adjustments on the high and low needle, is built into the carburetor. On M-Tronic, it is a separate module. Stihl has actually made that a maintenance item, and therefore they actually made the part relatively affordable. And I think that's really cool. I like that you can take that solenoid and the carburetor and break them apart. That just allows for better troubleshooting. And I think that that's a win-win situation right there. I would just prefer that being the case. And so I can't help but wonder if maybe Husqvarna is thinking about leaving that technology behind and just moving to fuel injection. I don't know. That's just something I'm wondering. Another thing, I might be wrong, but if you get a factory new auto-tune carburetor from Husqvarna, you cannot just pop it in your saw and run it. It has to be like paired to your coil. There's a lot of information. It has to be plugged into the dealer computer, and that's also a big drawback because if you're anywhere like I am, there is not that much dealer support, and that means that you really probably you're going to be getting a dealership involved for every repair. Otherwise, there's not really a reason to visit the dealership for repairs besides the fact that you have to have them plug in the saw to get that new carburetor working. On the M-Tronic, because that module is separate, as far as I'm aware, and please correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong, but that is not needed on the steel saw. Again, that is a huge advantage if that's the case. You can buy that part, pop it on, fire it up, see if it works. That's awesome. Here's the elephant in the room, right? So this saw is launching. I said that I want it to launch in the United States simultaneously, but if you know much about Husqvarna, it seems as if, and I haven't been around the saw scene as long as many of you, it seems like there is a lot of revisions on Husqvarna saws. For example, my 562 is technically a first gen, but it has been changed significantly since they launched years and years ago. It's got a whole different air cleaner. It's got a different air horn for that air cleaner. I think there's been bearing revisions and all of that, and that's all under that 562 XP name, or the Mark 1 as I refer to it. And then now they have a Mark II. They did it on the 550 XP. And what happens is they still call the saw the same thing, but then they call it a Mark II. So, for example, the 562 XP Mark II, very little is compatible with my saw. It's essentially been redesigned. Then you get into the little top handle, which is in the Mark III generation. I don't know much about it. I'm not really in a market for like hot top handles. I've already got my ported 2511. So I don't really have a need to have a Mark III top handle saw. I heard that they're pretty cool. And what I want to know from you guys, especially if you're a steel expert, or you've been around the saw world for a lot more years, it seems like Husqvarna makes a lot of revisions and a lot of variations of the same saw. It just seems like Husqvarna has more of a tendency to push a saw out into the field and then discover what's wrong with it. Of course, you can't work out all the details and problems of a saw pre-production. Once they get out into the wild, different use cases are going to occur, and people are going to find where the weak spots are. But it just seems as if, I'm thinking back based on like what A-Fleet Command has said in the past, the 372X Torx, when they first came out, they had a lot of problems with the the crank bearings, basically getting wallered out and creating air leaks. I'm thinking about the original 550 XP, the original 562. So many people still go back to those saws that were produced years ago, I think even over 10 years ago, and still say that they hate a 5 Series saw. And largely, you can find a lot of people that have had extremely good luck with the newer versions. The Mark II 562 doesn't seem to be showing really much trouble. The 550s XPs, the Mark II versions, they seem to be very good from what I can tell. So, it seems like they worked them out, but it's just a darn shame to be a first gen purchaser. Like, for example, this 564 XP, I would be a first gen purchaser, and I feel like, I don't know. What's your guys' thoughts on that? Now, I want to talk about a few things I want to see from Husqvarna in the United States. I really think that they've dropped the ball in numerous ways. And not only that, other companies are kind of following suit as well. It just has to do with big business. It seems like it's the trend in big business. What I hope for on this 564 XP is I've hoped that they've learned enough from the original 562 and making the 562 Mark II. I hope that this saw is actually ready for market, because I desperately want this saw to be successful. I want to own one. And I want it to break the mold. The 500i came out and it was fantastic from the beginning, and people really like them still. No one's waiting for revision 2. Everyone still wants to buy one. Besides some of the failures that they have from people being rough on them, if you pull on the saw, you can break mounts and all that. Side covers being a little bit weak from what I understand, but that's what you get for having such a powerful saw in that displacement and it being so light. Something has got to be given somewhere. So, you're going to reduce durability when you start cutting the weight as much as they did on that saw, but it still has a fantastic reputation, right? And then the most impressive thing about that reputation is the fact that saw is so prevalently used in professional logging. Those guys are hard on saws. I know I see people, that say, they've ran a saw for 30 years. In the logging world, from what I understand from the people that I know, I'm thinking Jason at Rafter E and, Timber Cutter Patriot, Boys in the Woods, those guys run their saws. And then I worked with a guy that logged here in Oklahoma. A year was what they used them. That didn't mean that the saw wasn't worth anything or that wasn't any good. They just used them for 1 year and then they purchased a new one. And then that saw would be used for less important tasks, firewood, personal usage, but it wasn't, or a backup saw, but it wasn't that main saw that they would take out into the woods every day. Those 500i's, there's a lot of time on those. Those guys are hard on them, and it's not like those saws are just blowing up right and left. Guys like them, and once they have them, they're like, yeah, this is where it's at. I would like Husqvarna to produce something that's like that. The next thing I want to see from Husqvarna is if these saws prove to be excellent tools, I would like to see this technology trickle down and up. And I think that the 60cc market is a great place to launch it because they're going to sell a lot of them. Absolutely, especially if the numbers are as good as they say they are. This one's gonna chap a lot of people. Now, what I'm gonna say next is gonna really probably perturb a lot of people. I want dealer support to be better. I know that dealer support has a lot to do with your region. I know that place is up directly north of me. I think even like around like New York and so forth. Husqvarna is much more popular than it is out here in Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas, even out west. I think that really Steel has it wrapped up. They have a fantastic dealer network. I have said repeatedly, and it stinks because Huskies are my favorite saws to run, but the Husky dealer network is extremely weak. You have to fight to find a dealership in my region. Around here, people only know Steel because that's the only thing they've really ever had available. And then when there is a Husky dealership, there's like no factory support. There's no rep for that dealership. That's a problem. Like anything that you buy, whether it be a tractor or an excavator or anything like that, everyone always talks about dealer support being like number one key. Well, if you don't have that dealer support, I have a dealership within 45 minutes of my home. I'm lucky. Not everyone even has that. Steel, on the other hand, within that same 45-minute radius, I've probably got 6 or 7 places I could take my equipment to or get parts from. So that's a big difference. I actually have more Echo dealerships than I have Husqvarna around. In fact, one of them is listed on their website as a Husqvarna dealership, but they don't stock anything. They just can get it for you. So that's not where you want to go if you have problems. I think a really big factor on this is a lack of a representative for a region or state or whatever, however you want to look at it. My understanding is that the reps are coming out of distributors, not the manufacturer. I think that a manufacturer representative would be key because they need to go around to those stores. They need to be able to address ongoing issues, be able to collect information, because I think that Husqvarna is very well aware and very well acquainted with the issues that they've had in the past. Just simply not having someone to talk to, having a face to the brand in your region or at the dealership, I think is a problem. I think that, well, for example, I recently had a problem with Facebook, on my creator account, and I felt so frustrated that I couldn't talk to anybody. Well, I ended up paying for support through Meta Verified, and what happened was I now had at least someone to talk to. Did that person resolve my problem immediately? They didn't. In fact, I had to chat in a few times, but ultimately it did get solved. They weren't really, those representatives from Meta weren't necessarily a huge, tremendous help, though they did help. It just was a comfort factor that I was able to actually speak to someone representing the company. And I think that this is the same thing with Husqvarna. I also want to mention, from a business standpoint, I don't want to see a representative just in key markets. From a business standpoint, that seems to make sense, that you would go ahead and serve the communities where you sell a lot more in better. I also think that that's a loss where you're failing to grow your market because you just simply don't have a presence. Again, you need to support those areas where Husqvarna isn't strong, because that's how you can grow your market. Because there's a lot of complaints on the orange and white side, or orange and cream side, because people feel as if they've been left alone. Dealerships don't really have a representative, from my understanding. If I'm wrong, again, make sure you comment down below. From what I can tell, Echo seems to be winning in this area. They're the underdogs. They're the ones that sell the least amount of chainsaws, though I think they probably are a pretty good competition in the string trimmer world. My local Echo dealership does have contact regularly from the Echo representative. Now, I don't know if they're coming from a distributor or what, but he brings merch. He comes and talks to them about the products. That helps drum up excitement amongst dealerships, technicians, mechanics, and so forth. Having that relationship with the manufacturer through some sort of representative that you know his or her name, you know their face, and you know that you can get some help in oddball circumstances. I think that Echo's winning, at least in my region here in rural Oklahoma. I want to reiterate, I really believe that that Stihl MS 400.1 has been greatly overshadowed by this 564 XP. I really do think that. That saw was really exciting sounding, but then when Husky drops a 60cc, and I'm just looking at that exhaust, oh my gosh, it looks awesome. You know, they've actually kind of changed how that muffler's shaped. It's really going to be interesting to see what can be gained from this. My 562 had to be modified in order for it to work like it should. This saw, I would love for it to work like it should stock, and I'm excited to see what guys do with them once they get their hands on them, because, you know, the power's already pretty good, but if the power can go up even further, this is going to be, they're going to sell as many as they can produce on this. In fact, I think that that's probably going to be one of the bigger issues, is can you get your hands on it? You know, everyone thought that the gas chainsaw market was done. This saw blows that out of the water. This is a huge astronomical development. And I just have a feeling that this is going to be developing side by side with their battery powered equipment as well. I think you might see a shift between like battery and fuel injection, and maybe some of that auto-tune stuff might be disappearing. I mean, it might not be happening real soon. I could just see that happening. Battery stuff, because battery stuff makes sense in certain circumstances. And then if you can just get absolutely insane power, usability, reliability with something like fuel injection, this is going to be just mind-blowing. And I actually, you know, in the past, in some previous videos, I kind of had alluded to my beliefs that they've just abandoned the platform. It's largely to do with the fact that I, as a consumer, was having problems, and I never could get Husqvarna, the company, to respond to me. And it's a darn shame. I was so frustrated, even though that saw that I really had a lot of frustration with and anger about. You know, I had spent a lot of money. I was in a different stage of my life, different stage in this channel, and I had a lot of problems with it. And basically that saw had to be modified through multiple attempts of getting it repaired through the dealership. I had kind of thought, you know, they're just abandoning, they're just not, because they hadn't come out with anything fresh in a long time. At that time, I want to say the newest stuff was like the 550 XP Mark II, the 545 and 550 XP Mark IIs. When the Mark III top handle T4 540 XP came out, I was like, whoa, that's kind of weird, because that saw was highly developed and changed from previous gen. So, hey, they're doing some updates. Then all of a sudden 562 Mark II comes out, and it's like, wow, maybe they haven't abandoned gas or two-stroke. There had definitely been some rumors and a lot of assumptions going along. Then you had some naysayers that said that gas would never be replaced. I think in a lot of circumstances it can be, and I do not think that it should be in every instance. You shouldn't make it so consumers can only buy, like, those Greenworks battery powered saws are just so they're powerful, but they're so incredibly expensive and they're so heavy. You don't want to put yourself as a manufacturer in that position where you're making people buy something they don't want to buy. What that means is they'll just go somewhere else. And this has really helped companies like Echo to rise up, and why saws like the 620p are so popular. Talking about the battery game, I think that the traditional saw manufacturers, Stihl, Husqvarna, and Echo, have a lot of catching up to do. We know that they can design chainsaws, but where they're behind is battery technology. They really are probably feeling the pinch on the battery market from like Milwaukee and DeWalt. In battery powered tools, the battery is where it's at. Electric motors they're easy to get performance out of those, but what it comes down to is battery tech. Those platforms have a lot of tools already, and people have investments in very expensive, large, high output battery packs. And so it's just natural for Milwaukee to make a big saw that takes two 12 amp hour batteries. Those things are absolutely incredible. Now, I've never run one. I've never really talked to, well, actually I have talked to someone, A&A Tree Service up north, Alex. He likes his Milwaukee battery stuff, but he's got a wide range of a lot of gas saws too, but he talks very fondly of the Milwaukee battery powered stuff. These manufacturers really need to get their battery stuff situated before they really start pushing their platforms, because no one wants to buy a saw or a string trimmer or whatever blower and have the battery not be compatible in 2 years. There's already criticism about the longevity of the tool anyway because of the batteries. When you start changing battery platforms because something better came along, what happens is now you're not just having to replace batteries, you're having to replace saws and trimmers and blowers. That's a big problem, and that's where I think Milwaukee's winning and DeWalt are winning, because they haven't changed their interface. Those saws, they generally design them to be able to take what they've been producing, whether it's an older version or a newer version. The platform grows with the tech as it goes. And I know like Echo has had a problem where they had a different voltage rating on different battery powered stuff. And this is the thing, these other companies like DeWalt and Milwaukee, they can improve their chainsaw design. All they have to do is learn from the best, which would be Stihl, Husqvarna, and Echo. I think for design in terms of durability, robustness, feel, and just all around usability, I think the Husky stuff is where it's at. Those manufacturers already have the difficult thing worked out, which is the battery power. Now what they need to focus on is where they're going with their actual design. Getting rid of plastic where it should be gotten rid of, slimming things down and getting better anti-vibe and so forth. Needless to say, what an exciting day. This saw, I think, is either going to be a tremendous success or it's going to be a flop. It's up to Husqvarna at this point. There's certainly a lot of excitement around it. A lot of people want it. A lot of people are saying, take my money now. I've just seen that repeated over and over again, and saw guys just like spending money. If this saw proves to be a good tool, especially on the first generation, Stihl's gonna need to refresh their lineup. That 400.1 is pretty cool. Maybe it's because they're confident in their Mtronic. Maybe it's a less expensive system to maintain and produce. Maybe they have better margins, and so maybe they want to focus that way. Whereas I think that Husqvarna really needs to reconsider their auto-tune setup and maybe do something more like Stihl did and make the carburetor and solenoid separate, so that way it can be serviced more easily. No one wants to throw stuff away unnecessarily. I am just really excited for the future to see where this goes. I want to hear all of your opinions below, talking about, are you excited about this? Are you thinking that you may even hold up on buying a 562 Mark II? I've seen that as well. A lot of people were wanting to buy those saws, or even a 572. Now that this has been announced, they're like, whoa, I'm so glad I didn't spend the money. Does this change anything for you today? Now keep in mind, we do offer discounts through my affiliate links at sawsuppliers.com. Husqvarna and Echo are available at fantastic prices, free shipping, and 10% off using my discount code OKI10. I suspect that 562 XP sales might be going down, but also this new 564 is likely to be quite a bit more money, so maybe the 562 won't get hit. Husqvarna has already increased their prices, and now they're launching a saw that is likely going to be even more money. I don't know if it's going to be $200, $300, $400 more. It's a very valid question. Are you going to hold off? Now, October in Europe, when does that mean for the United States? It's hard to say. I saw some speculation that it maybe another year or so. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.